caregiverreality.org.
The following views are those of the host and not those of Clear Channel Broadcasting licenses. Welcome to CareGiver Reality with your host, David Levy. David Levy brings more than 25 years of practical experience helping thousands of family caregivers find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse, a parent, or a loved one who is no longer able to care for him or herself, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, today's edition of CareGiver Reality and your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is another issue of CareGiverReality.com. I'm your host, David Levy, gerontologist. I'm here with my co-host and partner, Paul.
David, how are you?
Well, it's been a very busy week in caregiving, as you well know.
Yes.
And not just for everybody else, but this time around for me. I can't get into all the details, but we've had a very difficult week with my wife, who had surgery earlier last week, and I won't get into it, but I would never wish all the things that went on to happen to anybody. But so I don't want to be mysterious, so I'm not going to discuss it right now.
Well, I know it's been a difficult week for you, David.
Yes, it has. And Paul, how was your week?
It was, as you know, a typical week of caregiving with the ups and the downs, and Debbie was having some problems this week. Some of the old aches and pains returning from the neck, and some of the other problems that she had. And, you know, this whole fear of what may happen again, I think, is such a huge part of what we as caregivers have to deal with. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that, oh my gosh, I feel it in my neck again. It's coming back. I'm going to have to go through this procedure or that procedure. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the stress of just that fear regenerates a whole bunch of problems.
Well, you know, we see that very often because and the caregiver had their issues. As they get more stressed out, it's here it comes again, and what am I going to do about it, besides the fact that every new piece of information for your loved one adds to the pile of, you know, waiting for the shoe to fall and what's going to happen next. You're listening to us on WBZT 1230 AM. You want to call in, it's 1-800-889-0267, or if you're local, 567-844-6167. You can hear us on iHeartRadio, and one of the things I wanted to make mention, and all right, and on our website, of course, caregiverreality.com. Just click on Live Show, and there we are in living color. After all the weeks of promising,
yep,
we submitted the book to Kindle after having rewritten a major portion of it to update it for 2014, and within 6 hours it was accepted. That happened over the weekend, and so the new Family Caregiver Practical Problem Solving Manual is now available at Kindle, both as an ebook and as a talking book.
Excellent.
So that for those of you who don't like reading your ebook, you just clip in your earbuds and it will talk to you.
Congratulations, David.
Thank you. Well, everybody was involved in doing it, but I have to give the biggest shout out to Brenda, who's my editor, and really, really did a Herculean task of trying to convert what we had in Word and PDF files into the format for Kindle. But she did it. And kudos to her, and I'm very, very pleased. And this is even more advanced than the one that won the Florida Council on Aging Award, because we've had time to upgrade with a lot of new things that have come to light regarding caregiving. And so I hate to sound like a bad commercial and say bigger and better, but it really is.
But with all of the new technology, with the streaming of our show, the reach of our program, now with Kindle out there, the things that we're talking about, people can download and have that incredible tool available to them 24/7. It's just absolutely terrific.
Right, as opposed to having to wait for a hard copy to show up. But I must tell you that, there are some people that like to sit in front of paper, with a 3-ring binder, and we still make that one available at the Caregiver Reality website.
Right.
Now, we have 2 more that are coming out called Caregiver Train the Trainer for those organizations that want their people to learn more and understand how to use the book for caregivers in their end of the world. And then there is a professional series that took years to write, and it's about 1.5 inches thick, and it reminds me of a law book from law school. And
Well, it was written by a lawyer.
well, it was written by somebody that understands caregiving,
Right.
and probably there's more in there than anybody could use. But once you get started on the subject, you don't really want to leave something out. So both of those will be available within the next 3 months, but right now they'll be available as hard copy because I just don't see how we have the time and effort right now to try and convert it into Kindle as well. And I think professionals would prefer to have it in a hard copy
Do
version.
you want to elaborate which professionals?
Well, I'm
would find
talking
it
about
appropriate?
anyone that deals with family caregivers,
Okay.
and that could be people in the clinical field, because this is non-clinical caregiving, so it helps to round out an understanding. These are facilities and organizations that run caregiving on a regular basis. It could be a church, it could be a synagogue, it could be anywhere that caregivers meet, and where the folks that are doing it would like to benefit from a little more in-depth knowledge and the how and the why and the wherefore that over 26 years of learning and refining the process, I have discovered are effective ways to do it, and used in conjunction with the Family Caregiver Manual, it's really a great aid. So it's like a teacher's syllabus when the kids have their textbook, and so it's that kind of a setup.
Clearly, Caregiver Reality is growing.
Oh, yeah.
Its footprint is growing. Can you share with the audience some of the things that you see coming down the pike?
Well, first of all, I see our capability being enhanced. We're adding more centers of excellence, and I'll get back to things like medical research. And there are others that are seeing what we do and are beginning to understand the value that we add with the caregiving products and the information that we have, as well as the value of linking into this show and a lot of things that are going on. So our capability to reach caregivers is expanding, and so that's good. And our capacity, because of more information, more resources, so our capacity to help caregivers is expanding. And so our core offering, what we've always been doing to support that caregiver, is growing as well. And just like the things I'm talking about, our relationship with medical research charities, I can only tell you folks, this is a phenomenal organization to work with. They've made us, as we've told you in the past couple of weeks, their caregiver resource on their site, medicalresourcecharities.org. And today they have up the ability to make a donation to the charity of your choice as far as a disease research organization. And one of the things that we'll be getting back to today that I want to discuss are a few things about Alzheimer's. And one of the charities, research charities underneath the medical research umbrella, is Alzheimer's out of Scripps, La Jolla, California, which is probably one of the most prestigious institutes for doing Alzheimer's research anywhere in the world.
And caregiverreality.com is linked to that website. and vice versa.
We are linked to medical research charities, and all of those charities are available underneath. They're kind of like the umbrella for 25 major organizations. And one of the things they wanted me to say, they solicit the federal employees
Yes.
for charitable contributions. In 2012, they had about $250 million that came from, not just to them, but to all charities out of the federal contributions. This year, because of the economy and a lot of other things, it may not be as large, but we certainly need the ongoing research. And one of the things I'm going to get to in just a moment, because there was a lot of coverage on it, was Seth Rogen's testimony in the Senate this past week on the House that was listening to the issues regarding Alzheimer's. But medicalresearchcharities.org, go take a look. We're on there. We're helping them. And if you've got a charity, if it's cancer, heart, stroke, lupus, Alzheimer's, you can make a difference, because it's really the public that makes all the difference in how things get funded, not just Uncle Sam.
Reach into your heart and donate.
Yeah. And so without further ado, let me just go on and say Seth Rogen, who has done a lot of funny movies, was speaking before. I don't recall whether it was the House or the Senate this week, but it was the committee that was listening to a conversation about Alzheimer's. And he made the point that his wife's mother at 52 was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and at 59 she was institutionalized. His father-in-law has it, and he was making the point that if he were not selling movies at the rate that he does, he doesn't know how he could take care of his in-laws, because it takes a huge amount of money. And the point that he was making to this committee was, the federal government puts up $3 to $5 billion a year for heart, for cancer, $550 million for Alzheimer's, and it's one of the biggest scourges and growing. And if we don't support that research, right now we have nothing. At least heart, cancer, a lot of these other diseases have started because of all the research and the attention that's been given to them over these last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We've really made inroads. Cancer has now become more of a chronic illness than an immediate death sentence. Heart has really become something that we can do a lot with. The problem is that when it comes to research and doing something for Alzheimer's, we're still trying to figure out the ABCs of the brain. And so trying to find a cure or a solution for Alzheimer's, if the federal government is only going to give us $500 million when the others are getting 6 and 7 times that, and the public is affected as much as it is by Alzheimer's, then we got to get behind it and support it. And one of the best ways to do that is at medicalresearchcharities.org, because then you're supporting Scripps, Max Planck, a lot of the other major organizations that are doing leading bleeding edge research.
And David, this is not a political issue.
No.
It's a reality that the incidences of Alzheimer's are on a steady upward velocity, and yet the dollars that we're spending keep going the other way.
Right.
Where the other charities are finding the more money they're spending, the lower the incidences are.
Right. We have done so much walking and money raising for breast cancer, which I'm delighted to see.
Of course.
But what we're doing for Alzheimer's is far and few between. Yet, when we've seen the numbers on the screen from the American Alzheimer's Association, there are over 5 million people just with Alzheimer's, and we probably have 10 to 12 million people with various dementias, all of which are just as confusing as Alzheimer's is and are. And we've got 15 to 20 million of those caregivers impacted with it, and they'd sure like to know that somebody is really, putting a spade in the ground and getting work done. And we need to make sure that if the federal government won't cough up the money, that we have to do it. Well, anyway, you're listening to us on WBZT 1230 AM. You can call us at 1-800-889-0267 or on 561-844-6167. And you can always leave us information or a question or whatever you might want to know at info@caregiverreality.com. We're going to take a station break, and when we come back, Paul's got some very interesting things that he wants to discuss that happened this week.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic practical answers. What you need is an expert non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. One who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy. You can call in to speak with David on air, toll free, at 1-800-889-0267. That's 1-800-889-0267. Again, here's David Levy and more of today's Caregiver Reality.
We're back, and welcome to the Caregiver Reality Show once again. And one of the things that I wanted to make a point of is that in that hearing that Seth Rogen was speaking at, the committee has 22 members. And guess how many showed up to hear this very important piece of information about Alzheimer's?
Less than 22?
2. There were 20 seats that whoever was occupying them, they were transparent. And that is just, I think, a little glimmer of the concept of what it is that our government, even though we're not trying to be political, that our government views the issues of Alzheimer's. And we really have to get behind this because we're going to have 15 to 20 million people just with Alzheimer's by mid-century. And worldwide, it's an epidemic. I don't want to belabor the point for the caregiver, those of you that are dealing with it. It's a very tough disease. You've got to really understand that you have to go into their world. They can't come back to yours. Getting angry and frustrated with the disease, you might as well go argue with the door. And so for all of you that are dealing with a loved one that has dementia, we do our very best to try and support you, recognize you, and understand the difficulties that you have dealing with that illness.
Take that frustration and write your elected officials that this needs to be placed higher on our list of national priorities. Too many people affected.
Absolutely. And if you got a few extra bucks, medicalresearchcharities.org. I don't want to sound like I'm raising a big spiel.
They're good people.
But they're great people, and we're really glad to be part of helping them help others. So, Paul, we had a very interesting dinner this week. Why don't you...
We had a couple of interesting things happen this week. A colleague of mine, Ryan Chu, is with the Foundation's Recovery Network, which is a addiction recovery centers across the country that specialize not only in the addiction part of it, but also in dual diagnosis, where there are other mental health issues that might be present.
So what does this have to do with caregiving?
Well, interestingly enough, like any disease that has caregivers, be it cancer or heart, addiction is also a disease, and it also has caregivers.
Well, that makes good sense. So just like any other person with a disease that has a caregiver, addiction is a disease and impacts the caregiver.
They absolutely do, and they have many stresses, same other stresses that are different, but also need the support and the education in order to help their loved one. And one of the points that we made is one of the more difficult aspects of getting help to those that need it is to get them to a place where they're ready to ask for that help. And one of the things that Caregiver Reality can do is to help that family receive the education that they need, the support, the wherewithal to know how to ask for that help in a way that the one who is addicted is going to get that help. And this is where our conversation was directed.
Right. Well, because it's so interesting to see how comparable helping somebody who has to place a loved one in a facility and who is totally conflicted with guilt and whether the timing is correct or how and when it ought to be done. I would imagine that in the world of addiction, trying to figure out with a family member, a loved one, a husband, a daughter, whatever it may be, you've got those same kind of conflicts. All right, they may be slightly different, but yet the ability to guide them and understand that there's no perfect moment, that you have to do this for everybody's well-being and especially theirs. Because in looking at them as any other caregiver, then the same stressors, the same impact on their lives, the same worries and concerns, and even if you have money, all right, even if this is, for wealthier people, for argument's sake, and some of these facilities are, money does not cure the caregiver issues. Money cannot solve them. You may be able to buy more help or do more things, but the conflicts that you have in being a caregiver don't go away with money. And so rich or poor, a caregiver is a caregiver, and they all look the same when we look at them lined up in a row.
And as with other diseases, as that continuum of that disease moves along, the issues of the caregiver migrate and change, and they also need the support and the education to deal with each aspect of where they are in guiding their loved one as caregivers in the problems that they're facing in their own lives, not only in their own family, but in the extended family.
Well, that makes good sense. And, I see it constantly in the caregiver support groups that we do. And one of the things that's so important in a good support group is repetition. Because we've learned that not everybody is on the same page on the same day,
right,
or where they are in that continuum of care. We have new, early, later, new, in the middle, what have you. And I can't tell you, when we talk about things like we have on this show in the past, like having that documentation, durable powers of attorney, and advanced directives, I can discuss that almost every other week, and yet somebody will ask me at the same support group, what about those documents? Because all of a sudden, it's become important in their world, and now they're ready to focus on it. And so you can't tell people that are caregivers and really don't know and understand that I'm just not making it out to be a legal issue. But I was discussing it just the other day with Scott Solkoff, the eminent elder law attorney here in town. And he's telling me that he's seeing folks younger and younger and younger coming in for that documentation. Let's face it, anybody of legal age needs it because mommy or daddy can't speak for you. And especially if you're away at school and something happens, or you're away at college and something happens, you're not dealing with your local doctor. You're dealing with the system. And the HIPAA laws, the laws that protect privacy, etc., and the ability of the medical profession to speak to you is just the same thing if you go to college in Boston and you live in Miami. So a word to the wise, please make sure you've got the right kind of documentation. And this week I've had to use mine, and it's critically important. It's one of the basic fundamental issues of caregiving. It's the rudder to the ship. If you cannot guide your loved one in the clinical system, then you might as well just go home and wait till they tell you what they did, how they did it, and why they did it, if they even will.
And if I may add, David, these advanced directives of which you speak and which I've had to use numerous times, they need to be reviewed on a regular basis. Not only does the family situation change, the law changes, there are legislative changes that are court decisions that are rendered. These documents need always to be up to date and correct, so at the time that they are needed, they're going to do what you expect them to do.
Well, that's true. And besides just the law and the changing aspect of the formality of the document, we have to remember that the person that has granted the right to you, a spouse, a loved one, a significant other, needs to be able also, inside of those documents, not only to say what the statutory language says or what a good elder law attorney has scripted for you, but to say, what do I want? how do I want to be treated individually? And those documents can be modified to say who you want, how you want it, within the bounds, obviously, of what the medical profession can do, but especially at end of life. There may be things that you want when end of life is near.
Or don't want.
Or don't want, for that matter. Thank you. And the last thing in the world you want to do is leave to your loved ones to try and second guess what you wanted, how you wanted to be treated, what you wanted your legacy to be. And without those advance directives, then it's up to them to figure it out. And remember, their family, they're very emotionally conflicted. And unless we give them a clear direction for what we want, then many times they'll do things out of emotion that you would never want done. And try and pull out all the stops when that's not what you really wanted. And just like in a durable power of attorney, which grants extraordinary power to the person that you give it to, anything prior to October of 2012 is outdated because the laws were changed. Now, there's a perfect example of the statutory aspect of things, changing how the game gets played. And there are these superpowers that you have to specifically initial so that it's not as loose a document as it once was, where everybody thought it was just the right once it was signed. To go ahead and do whatever you wanted. Now, you specifically have to indicate for the person who's going to be your designated healthcare and durable power of attorney exactly what they can and can't do for you.
It also has been my professional experience that it is usually best that they don't exist in a vacuum, that what your wishes are need to be discussed with the people who are so appointed within the document, so that if there are questions or if there are differences or if there are interpretations, you have an opportunity, while you have your clarity and you're healthy, really to let people know how you feel. Let your family members know how you feel.
Well, that's one of the most important family meetings.
Yes.
Last week I was doing one of the elder law mediation classes, and I was stressing exactly that point, that over and above what the formalities of the documents say, you need to sit down and say, look, your mother and I, significant other and I, whatever it may be, have made these decisions, and we need to let you know what they are. I have seen so many families, I get so many phone calls from people that are now dealing with loved ones that are ill. And they say, my parents never discussed a thing. I don't know where the checkbook even is, let alone where the safety deposit box is, or I don't even know what credit cards they have. And if I ask, I'm told to mind my own business, but yet now I'm responsible.
It is your business.
Right, for taking care of them, and I don't know where I'm starting from.
That inventory is so important.
And that's part of a good plan. Part of the caregiver manual lays out all of the things that you need to know about where they are, what they say, what they do, not just paper, but where the whole lay of the land is. What do they own? Do they have property? Do they have timeshare? Do they have assets anywhere? Do they have specific wishes? We're not talking about a will. We're not talking about the issues of what happened after you die and your property and your assets are being dispersed amongst your heirs and beneficiaries. We're talking about documentation while you're alive that needs to guide what you want if you're not capable of saying it for yourself or the clarity to speak on your own behalf. And that's so critical, and you just can't let it go until you have to walk into a court and get a guardianship.
If I may add a point to that.
You may.
Thank you, David. When you talk about assets, I think we have to broaden that definition to also include our digital assets, because so much of what we now do is online, be it banking, brokerage, pictures, Facebook, I mean, you name it.
It's out there.
It's out there. They have usernames, they have passwords, they have privacy rules for each individual one. If that information is not cataloged or inventoried, those people that you so named, as much as they want to help you, if you live in that digital world and you have not specifically defined those digital assets, they are at a tremendous disadvantage.
And not only that, but in the course of what I've been doing over 26 years and an awful lot of caregivers, I've watched them go in with their documentation to banks, finance companies, all kinds of authoritative bureaucracy, and they put the document in front of them, and they say, no, we have to have it on our form. Well, if my loved one was capable of doing that, I wouldn't be here with it. Well, we want an original. Well, how can I give you original? There was one original, and it says right here, at least in Florida, that you must accept this copy the same as you would if it were a clear blue ink copy of the original. And they fight with you over that. And all of a sudden, people in those bureaucracies go dead on you. All right? No, I can't. I won't. Well, now I got to send it up to legal. And what should have been something that clearly was something that you could step in and do now becomes a further hassle because they don't want to do it unless they can do it their way.
As if the caregiver doesn't have enough stress already fighting the medical system, now they have to fight the financial system as well.
Or whatever the bureaucracy
Yeah.
may be. And if any of you have tried to go online for a loved one with Medicare,
Good luck.
and speak to them, you may get the courtesy of them giving you a little bit of direction, but the first thing they're going to ask, is Mom there? And if Mom is not capable of saying, I'm here, and it's okay for you to talk to my daughter, but after that, they're going to say to you, send us the documentation. And rightly so. But so many people think that they can just go to Social Security, go to Medicare, go to these institutions, and because they're a relative or a loved one, that they're going to just open the door and say, fine, we'll let you know, we'll tell you. And it just doesn't work that way. And if you're not prepared in advance, not only are you dealing with somebody that needs your help, possibly, as you said, medically, but how do you do anything else for them? And that's really the difficulty that goes on. And especially, we still have a whole generation that came through the Depression that won't give you the right time of day.
Yes.
And just keep it behind a closed vest. And I already made my arrangements. I had one couple come to me this week, and they were dealing with their mother. And she said to them, well, don't worry about it. It's all in my will. And, Mom, we can't wait until you're dead to figure out what you said. We need to know now.
Sure.
All right? And you're going in the hospital. And then the remark I heard was, well, I was in the hospital 6 months ago. And I did just fine without those documents. So why do I need them now? And so people are not as enlightened. And especially there are generations that just say, you know, the old statement, don't tread on me. Somehow or other I'll figure it out. And that's so difficult in an aging world, which gets more complicated all the time. It's 20 of, and we're talking to you from WBZT here at 12:30 a.m. We're on www.caregiverreality.com, iHeartRadio. We're going to go to a break, and we come back. Paul's got some other interesting things, and I do too, to tell you about. So stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic, practical answers. What you need is an expert, non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself, one who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. David Levy directly after the show, go online to info@caregiverreality.com. And remember, caregiver is one word. Now here's more of today's program, Caregiver Reality.
We're back, and we're on BZT, 12:30 a.m. We're happy to have you back with us. And Paul was just making an interesting comment to me during the break that even though his wife is not incompetent by any means, that he was doing his taxes this week, and he had to sign for her at the CPA's office, and he had to sign in the capacity of power of attorney. Now, she was not incompetent. She just physically couldn't be there.
She was unwell.
And she's not well. And so it made it very difficult, but he had the documentation. And so he signed in that capacity. Uncle Sam certainly accepts that. And if need be, you can always supply the government with a copy of your power of attorney.
Similarly, with closing on real estate or other types of transactions, it's not only for those things that we might construe as a negative, but having the right documentations also makes life a little bit easier in other ways. And we should keep that in mind.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I think as we move forward that we want to recognize is that our show is not just broadcast here in our own backyard. Because of streaming, because of iHeartRadio and a number of other media that pick us up, we're talking to the 50 states as well as some people around the world because it is available on the internet. And we want you to know that when we talk about these resources, that we're not trying to say, hey, this is the only thing you have and this is what we have in our own backyard. There are good elder law attorneys in all 50 states, but one of the things you have to be very careful of is that when it comes to documents as important as what we're talking about, and I'll just stay on documents for another moment, it's not something that you can, and I'm not casting aspersions. You want to do a real estate contract with legal.com or incorporate, great. But when you've got stuff as important as advanced directives and durable powers of attorney, you just can't go and pull them out of a file cabinet at Office Depot. It's just not fair to your loved one or to you. One of the really good documents in taking a look at advanced healthcare directives is something called the 5 Wishes.
Yes.
And it's available, I believe, at the5wishes.org. And it is, in plain speak, the ability to go through a lot of the things that have to be considered. And when it's executed and witnessed, it can be just as good as anything that an attorney did because it really takes you through things in a very understandable language. So if you're out there in the hinterlands and you do not have the ability to get to an elder law attorney or an attorney that really understands advanced directives for end of life and other situations, go online and look for the 5 Wishes. It's really a tremendous document and can be a very effective substitute. Durable powers of attorney, which makes somebody else in charge of your affairs, and happens immediately on the signing. It's
Here
not
in
something
Florida,
that wait
at
here in
least.
Florida, right? Most attorneys can do a good job, but you can go online for the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys, and it's called NALA, and you can see who's around or who you can speak to on the phone. You don't necessarily have to sit in front of them. You can have a phone conference and have a fee, tell them what you want, and those documents can be prepared. You may have to take them to your local bank to get them witnessed and notarized, but you can get the excellence that you need even if you don't have one in your backyard.
Just to carry this a moment further, since you opened the door with elder law attorney, which is really a misnomer in many regards, can you just address their specialty and why we refer to them as such an important part of the equation?
Well, it used to be that it was elder law because it was an easy way to distinguish from estates and wills and trusts,
Right.
and they called it elder law. But really, these are also attorneys that specialize in disability, special needs children, certain kinds of trusts that they need in order to be able to qualify if somebody is going to be, within the case of a special needs child, born that way or had a disease or an accident. and they're going to need public assistance for the rest of their lives, and they need to make sure that money or whatever proceeds might come from a settlement or things of that nature, that they don't disqualify themselves. And so it really takes the expertise. And if I were going to call an elder law attorney anything these days, I would call them an intergenerational expert on disability,
Very good.
aging, and those people that have those kinds of special needs, and they know how to work with what you have and understand the availability of resources. We have wonderful ones down here, and we're very lucky, but we're dead center in where everything happens here in South Florida because of our aging population, the length of time we've been involved, and there are a lot of people out there in the Northwest that don't have this. And so the ability to access over the internet the kinds of people that you need and get good advice, I can't tell you that when the time comes, you just can't rely on who you know. It's a combination of what you know and what you're prepared to put up when they say, show me. And you want to have the very best documentation that you can. And further, as we now continue to expand CareGiver Reality, which is available, out there for everybody, we're going to be putting up more and more information to the point that these are necessary things for you to use. This week, if I can clear out my own caregiving situation and get Freddie, this Friday we'll be taping another support group and moving forward in our series there. We don't have that many up because we're really trying to put them together to make a powerhouse presentation that is not only showing people what support groups do, but are on point for very specific issues. And in the meantime, you'll have to put up with what we've been doing, on this show, but we have a lot more to give you, a lot more to bring you, no different than the CareGiver Reality Manual, CareGiver Problem-Solving Manual. And CareGiver Reality wants to be a leader, and that's one of the reasons why we're finding more and more organizations are picking us to align with. And because we do have the kind of competent resources, they're very well vetted and gone through, they're informative, they're easy to access, and they make a difference. And folks, you will find, other than what happens when you go online and we have no control over it when you watch it on live stream or YouTube, there'll always be an ad for Chevrolet or Oreos. We can't stop that.
I go for the Oreos.
All right, they were doing a good Oreos one over the weekend. But other than that, other than the book, and at some point in the near future, that machine I was telling you about that I'm so impressed with for sick rooms that I have in a couple of facilities now going through the acid test, we do not take private advertising, but we're not interested in telling you or having others say we're the very best facility. What you need to know is how to understand what a facility that you're looking for can do and understand how to buy one. And then if you want, you can go to any of those sites that give you 40 different choices, and you can look around and see what's in your area. If you're looking for facilities and you don't want to go to a paid-for service, you can go to the Medicare.gov site, click on nursing homes and facilities, and you put in a zip code and a circles around, the distance around that zip code, and they will give you every facility that has a license to take somebody in for care that falls under the federal government for reimbursement, and they try and rate them by stars. That's not always the best determiner, but it's how the federal government and ACA and other organizations that rate them. But they rate them on certain things that may not be critical to you. Exactly what the temperature of the food is, and all of the safety equipment's important, but you want to know to be able to walk in and say to people, how long you been here? I'm talking about the help. What do you do? Show me how that works. Explain to me. All right, no different than if you walked in a showroom to buy a car and you were unsure. It's a new electric car, and you said, hey, I know about a car, but I have no idea what the all-electric car is. So explain me.
Yeah, it's an informed consumer.
Right, and you know, we used to have an organization down here that sold clothing, and his name was Cy Sims.
Cy Sims from New York.
Right, and his great line on the radio used to be, and on the TV, an educated consumer is my best customer.
Yeah, the late Cy Sims.
Yep, and it was true then, it's true now.
David, you had mentioned before about organizations that are coming to Caregiver Reality for the instruction and for the credibility in getting that information out to caregivers. We were very pleased to find out that a very important nationwide organization called the Purposeful Planning Institute.
Why don't you explain a little bit
I
more
will.
about that?
They're out of Colorado, and it is a nationwide organization of practitioners across multiple disciplines. In other words,
break that down.
Yeah, there are attorneys, there are CPAs, there are wealth managers, there are insurance people, there are therapists, there are addiction specialists, so on and so forth, that have organized themselves to share knowledge, to collaborate with each other, to make sure that the best interest of the consumer is, or the client is being served and is primary up front. And they have put together an annual conference called Rendezvous that's held in August in Colorado. And we were notified just this week that we have been asked to present a breakout session at their upcoming conference. And it's entitled The American Caregiver, The Missing Piece in the Care Puzzle, A Truly Endangered Species. And I think that says it all.
Yes. Did you write that? Because I didn't. No, that's terrific. I'm really looking forward to it. Not so much in terms of us telling them, but when I saw the roster of who's going to be there and the presenters and the opportunity to kind of be in that pool of both intellectual and practical wisdom and learn and be able to collaborate over a period of days that we'll be there, as well as have the opportunity to speak to them, that's really the kind of thing that moves Caregiver Reality forward. No different than last week when we mentioned, we were speaking to that elder law class at Nova Law School. And I'm going to be speaking at another law school here in Southeast Florida in the next couple of weeks. And the issue of caregiving for these kinds of practitioners is raising its head more and more. So the more that we can bring our practical approach to caregiving, the more that we take the mystery out of it, the more that we can help people understand what they're facing, the more I think we fulfill our mission.
And it's just so important that people see beyond the one who's in the bed and understand the risks and the challenges of that caregiver and the stresses that they have to face on a day-to-day basis, because it really is that part of the circle that is left incomplete as we do the planning that most families should be doing for themselves. Without looking out for that caregiver, we're shortchanging them.
Yes, and since there are 50 to 60 million of them out there, leaving them to their own devices, and not saying that everybody isn't smart, but we'll repeat what we always say. We just don't have a caregiving gene that blossoms because we're in a caregiving situation. And the intuitive skills that we have are not the skills that we need for caregiving. And so I can only say that one of the things that brings me a great amount of personal pleasure is that whole caregiving manual and how you plan, because I can't say it often enough, that if you understand your options, even if they're not great ones, and I know I'm facing some not very great options right now myself as a caregiver, but at least I understand, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm dealing with, so that maybe I can make the wisest decisions that I can and get some peace of mind that I can't reverse what's going on, but at least I could have the comfort that I did the best I could. And I think that's all anybody
That's all you
ask.
can do. I invite those that have Kindle to go and take a look
Oh, yeah, there's
at the manual.
Yeah, well, not only that, but you can read the first chapter or something along those lines.
Get a taste of it.
Yep, and get a flavor for what we're talking about. One of the things that we've added, and it has nothing to do with the addiction that you were speaking about, but I wrote a paper last year on the addiction of family caregiving, that when you have been involved in family caregiving for so long that it becomes not only your role, your life, your routine, etc., that even when you put a loved one in a facility, let alone when they pass away, you have a whole kind of detox process as you try and figure out who you are in a world where you're no longer that caregiver with that kind of responsibility on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis.
When I visited your support group last week, I mean, it came up and it was very clear that that need is out there, and they come to that support group looking for answers.
Right. And I was, thank you very much for filling in for me. All right. Well, you know, the more we do
Along
this.
with Dale, we made it through without you.
Okay. Well, you know, and I invite anybody out there, take a look at the website. You'll see where we do, in our own backyard, caregiver support groups. But, you know, one of the things you'll find in there is how do you run a successful support group. So if you want to start one, no matter where you are, even if it's you and 3 other people, all right, it gives you some very good information on how to do it without turning it into a crying session or a pity party. Because one of the things that you need to do in having an effective support